The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and broken dreams. I sat in that stiff chair, staring at the mahogany table where my grandmother's will lay spread out like a road map to my future. Except the destination wasn't what I expected. My name is Chelsea, and 3 days ago, I buried the only person who ever truly believed in me. As stated in Section 4, the lawyer droned, adjusting his glasses, Margaret Holmes leaves her granddaughter Chelsea the sum of $250,000 to be transferred immediately upon— Actually, my mother interrupted, her voice sharp as glass. We need to discuss this. I looked up from the papers. Mom sat across from me, perfectly composed in her black Chanel suit. Dad shifted uncomfortably beside her, and my older brother Connor lounged back like he owned the place. Which, apparently, he thought he did. Discuss what? I asked. Mom's smile was the kind that never reached her eyes. Sweetheart, we've been talking. You're only 22. That's a lot of money for someone your age. It's my money, Mom. Grandma left it to me. Of course she did, honey. Dad leaned forward, using his gentle voice, the one that usually preceded bad news. But we're your parents. We know what's best. Connor finally spoke up. Chelsea, let's be real. You've never handled serious money before. Remember when you overdrafted your checking account buying those expensive workout clothes? That was $50, Connor. Exactly my point. The lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps we should— We've already taken care of everything, Mom said smoothly. The money has been moved to a family trust, for Chelsea's protection, of course. The words hit me like ice water. What do you mean, moved? We're going to manage it for you, Dad explained. Help you make smart decisions. Maybe put some toward your student loans, invest the rest. Where is my money? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Mom reached across the table and patted my hand like I was 5 years old. Safe. Don't worry about the details, sweetheart. We're handling everything. I pulled my hand away. I want to see my account. Chelsea, Connor sighed. You're being dramatic. We're trying to help you here. Show me my account. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Finally, Dad pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. He turned the screen toward me. Joint account. His name and mine. Balance 0. Where did it go? I whispered. Connor's startup needed some capital, Mom said matter-of-factly, and we had some expenses. The house needed repairs, and your father's retirement fund took a hit last year. You spent my inheritance? We invested it in the family, Dad corrected. Connor's business is going to pay off big. You'll see. I looked at my brother. He wouldn't meet my eyes. How much is left? Another silence. Chelsea, you're not understanding, Mom started. How much is left? Connor finally looked up. We can pay you back when the business takes off. It's just temporary. All of it? You spent all of it? We did what we thought was best, Mom said, her voice turning cold. You should be thanking us. Do you know how many young people blow through inheritances? We saved you from yourself. I stared at them. My parents. My brother. The people who were supposed to protect me, not rob me blind. I need some air, I managed. Chelsea, don't be like this, Dad called as I stood up. We can discuss payment plans. I walked out. Just walked right out of that office, past the secretary, past the elevator, down 3 flights of stairs and into the parking lot where I finally stopped moving. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. My personal checking account, the one they didn't have access to, showed my last paycheck from the coffee shop where I worked part-time. $87, 22 years old, no family trust, no inheritance, no safety net. Just $87 and the taste of betrayal in my mouth. I sat in my beat-up Honda and stared at that number until it blurred. They'd taken everything Grandma left me and called it protection. They'd stolen my future and wrapped it up in condescending smiles and family loyalty. But as I sat there, something else started growing alongside the hurt. Something harder. Something that tasted like determination. They wanted me to start over? Fine. I'd start over, but I'd do it without them. 3 weeks later, I was living in Ariel's closet. Literally. "It's not that bad," Ariel said, helping me hang my clothes on the makeshift rod she'd installed. "Think of it as a cozy studio." I looked around the space that used to hold her winter coats. My air mattress took up most of the floor. "You're charging me $200 a month to sleep in your closet." "Hey, it's $200 a month including utilities and Wi-Fi. That's a steal in this city." She was right, and we both knew it. Ariel had been my lab partner in college, brilliant with computers, terrible with people. When I'd called her crying 3 weeks ago, she'd offered me her closet without hesitation. "Your parents still texting you?" she asked. I showed her my phone. 17 missed calls from Mom, 12 from Dad, 3 voicemails I hadn't listened to. "Block them." "I can't. What if there's an emergency?" "Chelsea, they stole your money. That was the emergency." I sank onto my air mattress. I keep thinking maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe they really were trying to help. "Stop." Ariel sat cross-legged on her actual bed. "You want to know what I think? I think you're scared to be angry because anger means you have to do something about it." Before I could respond, her roommate Jamie knocked on the doorframe. "Food's here." "And Chelsea, you look like you haven't eaten in days." Jamie was everything I wasn't. Confident, stylish, the kind of person who could walk into any room and belong there. She'd been surprisingly cool about me crashing in their closet, even though we barely knew each other. We ate Thai takeout on the living room floor because their dining table was covered in Jamie's photography equipment. "So, what's the plan?" Jamie asked, twirling pad thai around her fork. "Get a real job. Find my own place. Pretend my family doesn't exist." "Boring," Jamie said. "What did you study in college?" "Exercise science. I was going to be a personal trainer, but what?" "But that was before, when I had money to get certified, to rent studio space, to actually start a business." Ariel looked up from her laptop. "You don't need studio space. Look at this." She turned the screen toward us. "This girl makes 6 figures teaching yoga on Instagram. This guy built a whole fitness empire from his garage. That's different. They probably had money to start with." "Or," Jamie said, pointing her fork at me, "they had something you have." "What's that?" "Nothing left to lose." That night, I couldn't sleep. The closet felt smaller than usual, and my mind kept spinning. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through fitness influencers until 2 a.m. Ariel was right. Half of them started with nothing but a phone camera and determination. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to the building's tiny gym. It was empty. Just me and the flickering fluorescent lights. I started with basic exercises, filming myself with my phone propped against a water bottle. "Hey, I'm Chelsea," I said to the camera, feeling ridiculous. "I'm starting over, like completely over, and I figured maybe some of you are too." I posted it before I could chicken out. 0 followers, 0 likes. But it was something. The next morning, Jamie found me editing the video on Ariel's laptop. "Not bad," she said, watching over my shoulder. "But the lighting is terrible, and you need better angles." "I can't afford—" "I didn't say you needed to buy anything. I said you needed better angles." She grabbed her camera. "Come on, we're going to the park." 2 hours later, I had content for a week. Jamie had an eye for making everything look professional, even when we were using playground equipment as props. "Why are you helping me?" I asked as we walked home. "Because I know what it's like when people underestimate you," she said. "My parents wanted me to be a lawyer, said photography wasn't a real career." She gestured to her expensive camera. "Guess who's paying rent with fake work now?" That evening, Ariel helped me set up a basic website. Nothing fancy, just a place for people to find me. "What are you going to call it?" she asked. I thought about my family, about starting over, about proving them wrong. "Reset Fitness, for people who need to begin again." My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. "Sweetheart, you're being childish. Come home and we'll talk." I showed it to Ariel and Jamie. "Block her," Ariel said again. "Or," Jamie said with a wicked grin, "screenshot it and post it. Nothing says toxic family like calling someone childish for being upset about theft." I stared at the message. Then I did something I'd never done before. I turned off my phone. "I'm done talking," I said. "Time to start building." The coffee shop where I met Krista smelled like burnt espresso and broken promises. She sat in the corner booth, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "You look different from the funeral," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. "Poorer," I said. She didn't laugh. "I've been thinking about our conversation, about what happened with your grandmother's will." I stirred my coffee, the cheapest thing on the menu. "What's to think about? They took it. It's gone." "Actually, that's not entirely true." Krista opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I pulled the original will. Your grandmother was very specific about the terms." She slid a document across the table. I recognized Grandma's careful handwriting in the margins. "Section 12, Krista pointed to a highlighted paragraph. "The inheritance was to be transferred directly to Chelsea Holmes upon Margaret's death. No trustees, no family oversight. Direct transfer." "But they said—" "They lied." Krista's voice was flat. "Your parents had no legal right to touch that money. What they did was theft, plain and simple." The coffee cup shook in my hands. "So I can get it back?" "Legally, yes. Practically?" Krista leaned back. "That's complicated." "We'd need to prove they took it, trace where it went, and then sue your own family for recovery. It would take years and cost a fortune in legal fees." "Money I don't have." "Exactly." I stared at the will until the words blurred together. "So, they win." "Not necessarily." Krista closed the folder. "Sometimes the best revenge isn't legal action. Sometimes it's success." 2 days later, Ariel found me crying over my laptop in the closet. "What happened?" she asked, squeezing in beside me. I got my first client inquiry. Someone wants to pay me $50 for a workout plan. That's good news, right? I don't know what I'm doing, Ariel. What if I mess up? What if I'm not good enough? Hey. She grabbed my shoulders. You know more about fitness than anyone I know. You've been working out since high school. You helped half our dorm get in shape for spring break, remember? That was different. That was friends. This is business. And business is just helping strangers the same way you helped friends. Jamie appeared in the doorway with her camera. Speaking of business, we need to talk branding. Your Instagram is growing, but it looks amateur. Because I am amateur. No, you're bootstrap. There's a difference. She held up her phone. Look at this post from yesterday. 200 likes, 30 comments. People are connecting with your story. I looked at the screen. The post was a before and after photo, not of my body, but of my living situation. The first image showed my childhood bedroom with its princess wallpaper. The second showed my closet setup with the caption, "Sometimes starting over means starting smaller, but starting is what matters." The comments are insane, Jamie continued, scrolling down. Look at this one. Thank you for being real about struggling. Most fitness accounts are just rich people with perfect lives. And this one, I'm starting over too after my divorce. You're inspiring me to get back in the gym. People relate to struggle, Ariel added. You're not selling them perfection. You're selling them hope. That weekend, we turned their living room into a makeshift studio. Jamie rigged professional-looking lighting with desk lamps and white sheets. Ariel set up her laptop to live-stream my first official workout class. Remember, Jamie said, adjusting the camera angle, you're not performing for them. You're working out with them. 7 people joined the live stream. 7 strangers who paid $10 each to sweat with me in a cramped apartment. Okay, everyone, we're starting with bodyweight squats, I said to the camera. If you're in a small space like me, don't worry. We're making it work. By the end of the hour, I was exhausted but exhilarated. The chat had been full of encouragement, questions, and people sharing their own stories of starting over. Same time next week? Asked someone named FitMom47. Absolutely, I replied. After everyone logged off, I sat on the floor staring at my phone. $70. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Earned honestly, helping people who wanted to be helped. How do you feel? Ariel asked. Like maybe I can actually do this? My phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged me in a post. Just finished All Reset Fitness's live stream, and I'm dying, but in the best way. Finally found someone who gets that starting over is hard, but possible. Signing up for her program next week. Jamie grinned. Looks like you're booked. One client at a time, I said, but I was smiling too. That night, I updated my bio. Helping you rebuild from the ground up. Because sometimes the best foundations are the ones you build yourself. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Dad. I deleted the notifications without listening. I had work to do. 18 months later, I stood in my own studio apartment, staring at the bank notification on my phone. $23,000 in 1 month. Holy shit! I whispered to my empty living room. My phone rang. Ariel. Did you see the numbers? She asked, without saying hello. I'm looking at them right now. Chelsea, you realize what this means, right? You're officially making more than most people with college degrees. I walked to my window overlooking the city. The apartment wasn't fancy, but it was mine. No closets, no air mattresses, no asking permission to use the kitchen. The TEDx talk really pushed things over the edge, I said. Starting over at rock bottom has 2 million views now. And the comments? I know. I read them. The TEDx talk had happened 6 months ago. I'd almost backed out 3 times, convinced I had nothing valuable to say. But Jamie had literally driven me to the venue and threatened to post embarrassing photos if I didn't go through with it. Your mom texted me yesterday, Ariel said quietly. I stopped pacing. What? She found my number somehow. Asked if I knew how to reach you. What did you tell her? That you're busy building an empire. My doorbell rang. I have to go. Client consultation. But it wasn't a client. It was a man in an expensive suit holding a leather portfolio. Chelsea? I'm Ezra. We spoke on the phone about representation. Right. The agent. I'd been putting off this meeting for weeks. Come in, I said, suddenly aware that my apartment, while mine, was still pretty basic. Ezra didn't seem to notice. He sat on my couch and opened his portfolio like he was presenting to a Fortune 500 company. Let's cut to the chase, he said. You're leaving money on the table. A lot of money. I'm doing fine. You're doing $23,000 a month with basically no marketing budget and 0 brand partnerships. Imagine what you could do with proper representation. He slid a contract across my coffee table. I have 3 companies ready to offer you deals. Athletic wear, supplements, meal prep services. We're talking 6 figures minimum. I picked up the contract. The numbers made my head spin. What's the catch? No catch. You've built something real. People trust you because you're authentic. That's worth more than any manufactured influencer campaign. I need to think about it. Of course, but Chelsea? He stood up, straightening his jacket. Don't think too long. Success has an expiration date if you don't capitalize on it. After he left, I called Jamie. He's right, you know, she said. You've been turning down opportunities because you're scared of selling out. I'm not scared. You are. You think if you make too much money, you'll become like them. She didn't need to specify who them was. Maybe I will. Chelsea, your family stole from you because they thought they deserved what wasn't theirs. You're earning this. There's a difference. That evening, I was editing content when my phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line made my stomach drop. From your father. I stared at it for 10 minutes before opening it. Chelsea, I know you're angry, but this has gone on long enough. Your mother is worried sick. Connor's business failed, and we're in a difficult position financially. We need to talk. Family is family. Please call me. Dad. I screenshot the email and sent it to Jamie and Ariel. Jamie responded immediately. The audacity is breathtaking. Ariel called. Are you okay? I'm fine. It's just weird, you know? They ignored me for 18 months, and now that I'm successful, suddenly they want to talk. What are you going to do? I looked around my apartment, at the ring light Jamie had helped me set up, at the whiteboard where Ariel had mapped out my content calendar, at the stack of thank you cards from clients who'd transformed their lives. Nothing, I said. I'm going to do absolutely nothing. But that wasn't entirely true. I forwarded the email to Krista with a note. Is there a statute of limitations on theft? Her response came within an hour. Not in this case. Why? I didn't answer. Not yet. The next morning I signed Ezra's contract. Within a week I had my first major brand partnership, a 6-month deal with an athletic wear company that would pay more than my parents had stolen. How does it feel? Jamie asked as we celebrated with takeout in my apartment. Like the beginning, I said. My phone showed another missed call from Dad. I let it go to voicemail. I had bigger things to focus on now, like proving that starting over wasn't just possible. It was profitable. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing contracts for my new supplement line. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Home. Chelsea? Dad's voice sounded older, strained. Thank God you answered. What do you want? We need to talk. In person. We have nothing to talk about. Please. The word cracked. It's about Connor. And the house. I set down my coffee. What about the house? We're losing it. The business failed completely. We owe more than we can pay, and the bank. He took a shaky breath. We need help, Chelsea. Family help. Family help. I repeated the words slowly. Like the family help you gave me when you stole my inheritance? We didn't steal anything. We made an investment that didn't work out. An investment in Connor's boat and Mom's shopping sprees. Silence. How much? I asked. How much what? How much do you owe? That's complicated. Try me. Another pause. Between the house, Connor's debts, and the credit cards, about 400,000. I almost laughed. 400,000. You blew through my 250,000 and then some. Chelsea, please. We're family. Family doesn't steal from each other, Dad. I hung up. 20 minutes later, Mom called. Chelsea Marie, how dare you hang up on your father? Don't middle name me, Mom. I'm 25, not 5. You're acting like a child. We raised you better than this. You raised me to trust family. Look how that worked out. We made mistakes, but that doesn't mean you abandon us when we need you most. Like you abandoned me. We never abandoned you. We tried to protect you from making poor financial decisions. I looked around my penthouse apartment, the one I'd moved into last month after my business hit $75,000 a month. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, a view of the city skyline. How's that working out for you? I asked. Chelsea, please, your brother he's not handling this well. He's talking about bankruptcy, maybe worse. Maybe he should have thought about that before he bought a boat with my money. It wasn't just the boat. The business needed capital, and we thought... You thought you could steal from me, and I'd never be successful enough to call you on it. The line went quiet. We saw your interview, Mom said finally. On that business podcast, you mentioned starting over after family betrayal. I didn't mention names. People figured it out. Your cousin Sarah called asking if it was true. Good. Let them be embarrassed. I'll meet with you, I said. Once, this weekend. Oh, thank you, sweetheart. We can come to you or... No, I'll come there, to the house you're about to lose. Saturday morning, I drove my new Tesla through my old neighborhood. The houses looked smaller than I remembered, shabbier. I parked in the driveway behind Dad's 15-year-old sedan. The front door opened before I could knock. Mom stood there in a faded sweater, looking older than her 52 years. Chelsea, You look—" She paused, taking in my designer clothes, my professional styling. "You look successful." "I am successful." Dad appeared behind her, and I barely recognized him. Grey hair, deep lines around his eyes, shoulders slumped like he was carrying the weight of the world. "Come in," he said. "Please." The house felt different. Emptier. I noticed missing furniture, bare spots on the walls where paintings used to hang. "You've been selling things," I observed. "Whatever we could," Mom admitted. Connor emerged from the kitchen, and I had to work to keep my expression neutral. My brother looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing clothes that hung loose on his frame. "Hey, sis," he said, attempting his old charming smile. It fell flat. "Connor!" We sat in the living room where they'd once lectured me about financial responsibility. The irony wasn't lost on me. "So," I said, crossing my legs, 400,000. Dad nodded miserably. "Tell me exactly how you spent my inheritance." "Chelsea, does it matter now?" Mom asked. "It matters to me." Connor cleared his throat. 50,000 went to the boat, another 100 to the business startup costs. The rest— He gestured vaguely. "The rest what?" "Living expenses. Mom's medical bills from her surgery. Dad's retirement fund was wiped out in the market crash, so we used some to cover that gap." "And the rest?" Nobody answered. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, turned the screen so they could see it. Their eyes widened. 2.8 million, I said calmly. "That's what I'm worth now. Built from nothing after you left me with $87. "Chelsea," Dad whispered. "We had no idea you were doing so well." "Of course you didn't. You never bothered to check." I stood up. "I'll think about it." "Think about what?" Mom asked desperately. "Whether family means anything to me anymore." I walked toward the door, then stopped. "By the way, I recorded this conversation, for legal purposes." Their faces went white. "I'll be in touch." I made them wait 2 weeks. 2 weeks of ignored calls, unanswered texts, and voicemails I deleted without listening to. 2 weeks while I had Krista prepare documents and Ezra negotiate my biggest brand deal yet, a 7-figure partnership that would make me financially untouchable. When I finally called Dad back, I kept it simple. "Saturday, 2 o'clock. Same place." "Chelsea, thank you. We've been—" I hung up. This time I brought back up. Not Ariel and Jamie. They'd wanted to come, but this was something I needed to do alone. Instead, I brought something better, a manila envelope, and the kind of calm that comes from holding all the cards. I knocked on the front door instead of walking in. When Mom opened it, she looked like she'd aged another year in 2 weeks. "Chelsea, come in, please." The living room was exactly as I'd left it, except now there was tea service set up on the coffee table. Mom's good china, the set she only used for important guests. "I made your favorite cookies," she said, gesturing to a plate of chocolate chip cookies that looked store-bought. "I don't eat refined sugar anymore." Dad and Connor were already seated. Dad looked nervous. Connor looked defiant, like he was gearing up for a fight. I sat in the same chair I'd occupied 2 weeks ago and placed the envelope on the table between us. "So," I said, "let's talk about family." "Chelsea, we know you're angry," Dad started. "Do you remember this table?" I interrupted, running my hand along the wood surface. This is where you told me I wasn't financially responsible enough to handle my own inheritance. Right here, in these exact seats. We were trying to protect you, Mom said. From what? From paying off my student loans? From starting a business? From having a safety net while I figured out my life? From making mistakes, Connor said. Like I did. I looked at him. Your mistakes cost me everything I had. Your mistakes left me sleeping in a closet and eating ramen for months. We didn't know it would turn out like that. You didn't care how it turned out. You saw money that wasn't yours and you took it. It was family money, Mom insisted. Grandma would have wanted us to help each other. Grandma left it to me, not to us. To me, specifically. I pulled out my phone and opened my voice recorder app. This conversation is being recorded, by the way. Their faces went pale. Chelsea, that's not necessary, Dad said. Neither was stealing from me, but here we are. I leaned back in my chair. Let me tell you what I've learned about family in the past 3 years. Real family doesn't steal from you and call it protection. Real family doesn't ignore you for 18 months and then come crawling back when they need money. We're sorry, Mom said, tears starting to form. We made mistakes, but we're still your family. Are you? Because family is supposed to support each other. Family is supposed to celebrate each other's success. I gestured around the room. When's the last time any of you asked how I was doing? When's the last time you congratulated me on building a business? On speaking at conferences? On helping thousands of people transform their lives? Silence. You want to know what real family looks like? Ariel let me sleep in her closet for months and never asked for anything in return. Jamie spent her own money helping me create content. They celebrated every small victory with me. They were there when I cried, when I doubted myself, when I wanted to give up. We would have been there too if you'd let us, Dad said quietly. Would you? Or would you have just tried to manage my success the same way you managed my inheritance? Connor finally spoke up. Look, we get it. We screwed up. But we're family, Chelsea. Blood is thicker than water. Actually, I said, picking up the envelope, the full quote is, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb." It means the bonds you choose are stronger than the ones you're born with. I opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. This is a bill, I said, sliding it across the table. For $250,000, the exact amount you stole from me, plus interest. Plus damages for the opportunities I lost while I was rebuilding from nothing. Dad picked up the paper with shaking hands. Chelsea, we don't have this kind of money. I know. You spent it, remember? So, what are you saying? Mom asked. I'm saying you have 90 days to figure it out. Sell the house, liquidate your retirement, get second jobs, do whatever you have to do. And if we can't, Connor asked, then I'll see you in court. And unlike you, I can afford good lawyers. Mom started crying. Chelsea, please, we're your parents. My parents wouldn't have stolen from me. I stood up. 90 days. Wait, Dad called as I headed for the door. What if we can't pay at all? What if we can only manage part of it? I stopped and turned around. Then you'll learn what it feels like to start over with nothing, just like I did. Chelsea, Mom sobbed, we love you. Love doesn't steal. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't abandon. I walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Mom, next time you want to protect someone from their own money, maybe make sure you're not the one who needs protecting. I made it exactly 3 steps past the front door before all hell broke loose behind me. Are you kidding me right now? Connor's voice exploded from inside the house. She's actually going to destroy us over this? I stopped walking, but didn't turn around. Connor, calm down. Dad's voice, strained and desperate. Calm down. She just handed us a death sentence. We don't have that kind of money, and she knows it. The front door slammed open. I turned to see Connor storming after me, his face red with rage. You selfish bitch! He spat. You're really going to ruin your own family? Connor! Mom's horrified voice from the doorway. No, I'm done pretending this is okay. He got in my face, close enough that I could smell the alcohol on his breath. You think you're so much better than us now with your fancy car and your penthouse? You think money makes you special? I think earning money makes me different from people who steal it, I said calmly. We didn't steal anything. We invested in family. You invested in a boat, and designer handbags, and whatever else you wanted while I was eating ramen and sleeping on floors. That was your choice. You could have stayed home. And let you steal more from me. No thanks. Dad appeared behind Connor, trying to pull him back. Son, this isn't helping. Nothing's going to help. Connor shoved Dad's hands away. She's going to take the house. She's going to destroy us. And for what? Money she didn't even earn. I didn't earn it. My voice went dangerously quiet. I didn't earn the inheritance Grandma left me? The inheritance you spent on your failed business and your toys? You know what I mean. No, I don't. Explain it to me. You got lucky with your little fitness thing. You're not some business genius. You just got lucky that people are stupid enough to pay for workout videos. I pulled out my phone and held it up, still recording. Say that again, for the record. Put that thing away, Mom pleaded, finally reaching us. Please, both of you, just stop. Oh, I'm not stopping anything, I said. I'm finishing what they started 3 years ago. We were trying to help you. Mom's voice cracked. You thought I was too stupid to handle my own money. You thought I'd waste it, so you decided to waste it for me. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Mom? Explain to me how stealing from your daughter was an act of love. She opened her mouth, then closed it. No answer. That's what I thought. Connor stepped closer again. You want to know the truth? Fine. We spent your money because we knew you'd never amount to anything. We knew you'd blow it on stupid dreams and end up broke anyway. At least we got some use out of it. The words hit like a physical blow. Dad and Mom both gasped. Connor, no, Dad whispered. But Connor wasn't done. You were always the screw-up, Chelsea. Bad grades, no direction, no real plans. We were doing you a favor by taking that burden off your hands. I stared at him. At this man who used to be my big brother, who used to protect me from bullies at school. Who was now the biggest bully of all. Thank you, I said quietly. What? Thank you for finally being honest. I held up my phone. Every word of that is recorded, including the part where you admitted you stole my money because you thought I was worthless. The color drained from his face. Chelsea, he didn't mean... Mom started. He meant every word, and now I have proof. I walked to my car and opened the door, Behind me, I could hear them arguing, voices rising and falling in panic. "Chelsea, wait!" Dad called. "Please, let's talk about this rationally." I turned around one last time. They stood there in their driveway, Mom crying, Dad pleading, Connor realizing he'd just destroyed any chance they had of mercy. 90 days, I repeated. Then I reached into my car and pulled out the envelope. "Actually, you know what?" I tore it in half, then in half again. "What are you doing?" Mom asked. "I don't want your money," I said, letting the pieces fall to the ground. "I don't need your money. I just needed you to know that I could take it if I wanted to." "So, we're okay?" Dad asked hopefully. "No, we're done." I got in my car. "Don't contact me again. Any of you." "Chelsea!" Mom ran toward the car. "You can't just leave like this. We're your family." I rolled down the window. "My family is the people who believed in me when I had nothing. You're just the people who made sure I had nothing to begin with." I drove away without looking back. My phone rang immediately. Ariel. "How did it go?" "It's over," I said. "Good over or bad over?" I thought about Connor's words, about the hatred in his eyes, about the way they'd all looked at me like I was the villain in their story. "Free over," I said finally. And for the first time in 3 years, I meant it. The podcast studio was smaller than I expected, but the host's energy filled the space completely. "So, Chelsea?" she said, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. "You've built this incredible empire, but your origin story is pretty dark. Tell us about starting over." I adjusted my headphones and looked at the red recording light. Starting over isn't just about losing everything. It's about discovering who you are when everything familiar gets stripped away. You've mentioned family betrayal in previous interviews. That must have been devastating. It was. But it was also clarifying. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most do you the biggest favor. They force you to find out what you're really made of. And what are you made of? Spite, apparently. I laughed, and she laughed with me. But also determination, and the realization that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them most. After the recording, I drove to my new place. Not a penthouse this time, but a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls, a full gym, and a professional podcast studio. The kind of space I'd dreamed about when I was sleeping in Ariel's closet. Jamie was waiting in the kitchen, editing photos on her laptop. "How'd the interview go?" she asked without looking up. "Good. Really good. She asked about the scholarship?" "The Margaret Foundation." I nodded. The scholarship program I'd started in Grandma's name was already helping its first group of recipients, women over 20 who needed financial support to restart their lives after major setbacks. "Speaking of which," Jamie said, turning her laptop toward me. "Look at this application." I read the screen. A woman named Sarah, 28, recently divorced, trying to start a catering business after her ex-husband emptied their joint accounts. "She reminds me of someone," Jamie said meaningfully. "Approved," I said immediately. Ariel walked in from the gym, towel around her neck, sweaty and grinning. Guess what just happened? "You finally beat your deadlift record?" "Better. I got a job offer from that tech startup in Seattle. Senior developer position, 6 figures. I hugged her, genuinely thrilled. "That's amazing. When do you start?" "That's the thing. I turned it down." What? Why? Because I'm not leaving my business partner hanging. She gestured around the space. We're building something here. All of us. It was true. What had started as me sleeping in Ariel's closet had evolved into something bigger. Jamie's photography business was booming thanks to the network we'd built together. Ariel had developed apps for 3 other fitness influencers. And me? I was pulling in 6 figures monthly while helping people rebuild their lives. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Hey sis, can we talk? Connor. I showed it to Jamie and Ariel. Block him, they said in unison. Already did. I deleted the message. Some bridges are meant to stay burned. Any regrets? Jamie asked. I thought about it, about the family dinners I'd never attend, about the nieces and nephews I might never meet, about the parents who'd raised me but never really knew me. No, I said. I chose the family I wanted instead of settling for the one I got. That evening, I was responding to messages from scholarship applicants when my doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw a delivery driver with a massive bouquet. The card read, "Congratulations on the Forbes feature. So proud of you. Mom." I handed the flowers to Jamie. Put these in the guest bathroom. That's cold, she said, but she was smiling. That's boundaries. The Forbes article had come out that morning. From betrayal to empire, how one woman built a multi-million-dollar business after family theft. The journalist had been thorough, fact-checking everything, including the legal documents Krista had provided. My phone rang. Ezra. Have you seen the response to the article? He asked. I've been avoiding social media today. Don't. It's incredible. 3 major networks want to interview you. Netflix is interested in your story, and... He paused dramatically. Oprah's people called. Oprah? Oprah. After I hung up, I sat in my home gym, the space where I'd filmed thousands of workouts, where I'd built my empire rep by rep, client by client. Ariel found me there an hour later. You okay? They said I'd never amount to anything, I said. They said I was the screw-up. And now? I looked around the space, at the wall covered with thank you notes from clients, at the vision board where I'd mapped out goals that seemed impossible 3 years ago, at the life I'd built from nothing. Now, I know they were wrong about everything except one thing. What's that? I did start over. I stood up and grabbed my water bottle. But I never promised to bring them with me. My phone buzzed with another notification, another interview request, another opportunity to tell my story and help other people find their own strength. I smiled and got back to work.
My name is Eleanor Pierce. I was 32 years old the day my family handed my sister a check for $10 million and told me to go earn my own. We were sitting in a sunlit room at a vineyard estate in Northern California, the kind of place they rented for appearances. My mother wore cream silk and smiled like she hadn't orchestrated every betrayal that led us here. My father adjusted his cufflinks eyes, flicking from the wine glasses to the lawyer's hands. My sister Sienna looked radiant, glowing in a sage green dress that probably cost more than my annual lab grant. The lawyer slid the envelope across the table. To Sienna Pierce, he read a gift of $10 million in recognition of her continued commitment to the family's legacy. Then they turned to me. No folder, no explanation. My father's voice was smooth, practiced. You've always wanted your independence, Eleanor. We think it's time you earn it. I didn't cry, I didn't flinch. I kept my eyes on that polished wood of the table, pretending my pulse wasn't hammering against my ribcage. My mother crossed her legs as if this was all perfectly civilized. Sienna smirked fingers, tapping a rhythm against her champagne flute. Then, from the corner of the room, a woman in a gray linen suit stood up. She had been silent the whole time. "There is," she said quietly, "one more document, from Walter Pierce, my grandfather." Every breath in the room stilled, and something inside me began to wake. Before you hear the whole story behind that moment, if you've ever been abandoned, hurt by your own family, and still forced to smile through it, leave a comment. I'm not telling this to complain, but because, maybe somewhere, you've felt what I felt. Now, let me take you back to where it all truly began. Long before inheritance checks and champagne rooms, there was a white farmhouse tucked into the hills above Dry Creek Valley. It smelled of damp wood, rosemary, and the faint sweetness of compost. That house raised me more than my parents ever did. I spent most of my childhood summers there, barefoot in the garden rows, while my grandfather, Walter Pierce, taught me the slow language of soil. He wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke, it stuck. "The land doesn't reward speed, Ellie," he'd say, patting the earth beside his tomato plants. "It rewards patience, stewardship." I learned to prune, to graft, to wait. And in between, I learned to listen to bees, to rain, to silence. My parents had other priorities. When they left their tech careers behind to launch The Garden Fork, a farm-to-table empire built on branding rustic authenticity, they used my grandfather's land as a PR backdrop. They posed in wide-brimmed hats for local magazines and filmed promo videos at the vineyard, while interns did the actual harvesting. At first, I thought they just didn't understand what the land meant to him. Later, I realized they didn't care. Sienna, my younger sister by 3 years, thrived in that curated world. She had the charm, the smile, the kind of ambition that knew how to read a camera lens like a love letter. When she started her lifestyle channel at 23, Mom became her manager. Dad built her a studio out of the old hay barn. The caption on her first viral post read, "Reclaiming our roots, one sustainable bite at a time." She wore a linen apron in that photo. My grandfather's hands had stitched it 30 years earlier. She didn't mention him once. I tried to stay connected. Even after I moved to Montana for my doctoral work, I'd call Grandpa every Sunday. He'd ask about my fieldwork, and I'd send him soil samples, photos of clover rotations, videos of insect movement. He responded with handwritten notes, sometimes sketches. They felt like a secret language no one else had the patience to learn. The last time I saw him alive was early spring. I had flown in for a conference and driven up unannounced. Sienna answered the door. She looked startled, then smiled in that clipped on-camera way. "Oh," she said, leaning against the frame. "He's resting. He hasn't been up for visitors lately." I remember glancing past her shoulder, just enough to see his boots by the fireplace, one laced, one not. I left a jar of honey on the porch. He never called back. At the funeral, I arrived at noon, dressed in black flowers in hand. The groundskeeper met me at the gate. "It was this morning, miss," he said, eyes full of something I couldn't name. They already buried him. That day I stood alone by a fresh mound of earth, with no family, no service, no goodbye, just the sharp scent of rosemary in the breeze, and a silence that told me everything I hadn't wanted to believe. After the funeral, I stayed away. Not out of anger, at least not at first, but out of something colder, more familiar. Resignation. I returned to Montana, buried myself in my research, and let the phone calls stop. No more Sunday check-ins, no more jars of honey. My family didn't ask where I'd gone, and I didn't offer it. From time to time, I'd see them online. Sienna posted clips from our childhood garden, rebranded into a content series called The Heirloom Hour. My mother appeared in cameos, her voice honey-sweet and polished, talking about heritage and family values. My father's name was still listed as co-founder on the Garden Fork website, though I knew from the business registry he'd quietly transferred ownership to Sienna the year prior. I was nowhere in that story, not even as a footnote. A photo of my grandfather once hung in the dining room of the old farmhouse, framed in oak, slightly crooked, the glass always dusty. It vanished sometime that year. In its place, a framed quote, probably printed off Canva, reading, "Sustainability starts at home." The irony made me laugh, bitterly. I didn't expect to be called back when he passed. I assumed whatever legacy he left behind had already been packaged, monetized, and trademarked by people who knew how to turn grief into product lines. Then, 6 months later, I received a formal letter. It came in a cream envelope, thick stock, no return address. Inside, an invitation to a private will reading. I almost didn't open it. My first instinct was to toss it into the recycling bin with the rest of the glossy catalogs, promising organic luxury for your soul. But then I saw the signature at the bottom, Ms. Donnelly. That name meant something. She wasn't the family lawyer. She was Walter's. Quiet, reserved, never at the holiday table. I only met her once years ago when I was 16 and tagging along to his notary appointment. She had silver hair then and eyes that missed nothing. She'd handed me a Werther's from her desk jar and asked if I'd ever thought about botany school. I hadn't even told her I liked plants. Now she was calling me back into a story I thought had already ended. I packed light, just one suitcase, my field notebook, and a letter my grandfather wrote me the year I got my first research fellowship. It wasn't long, just 4 lines penned in his neat, blocky script. Some things don't grow under spotlights. They need shade, stillness, and time. You were never slow, Eleanor. You were just planted deeper. I kept that note tucked in my pocket as I walked into the reading. And when they told me to sit, that the inheritance had already been distributed, that there was nothing further for Miss Pierce, I said nothing. I simply waited, until the woman in the gray suit stood up, and my grandfather's voice, though no longer living, found its way back into the room. Ms. Donnelly didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. There is one more document, she said, laying a worn envelope on the table like it was made of glass. Walter Pierce requested this be read only after all formal matters were concluded, and only in the presence of both his granddaughters. My mother shifted in her seat. My father exhaled through his nose. Sienna made a sound like a scoff, but it didn't land. The room had shifted barely perceptible, like a wind changing direction before the storm breaks. Ms. Donnelly slid a folded letter from the envelope and opened it with slow, deliberate hands. No theatrics, just wait. To Eleanor Margaret Pierce, she began, I'm sorry this comes in ink and not in voice. I tried. God knows I tried. But some messages get intercepted. Some numbers mysteriously change. Some doors are closed before you even knock. Sienna's gaze flicked to my mother. My mother didn't look back. You were always the one who listened to things others ignored. Rainfall patterns, root drift, the way bees move when the barometric pressure dips. You didn't need applause to keep going. You just needed truth. My throat tightened. I kept my hands flat in my lap, jaw locked. I watched them turn the land into a set piece. I let them. I thought maybe proximity would teach them reverence. I was wrong. You were the only one who came to learn, not to claim. He paused in his own handwriting. A line break. Then I've left you the only thing worth a damn, the living part. Ms. Donnelly turned the page. Her voice, though steady, had thinned slightly. To Eleanor, I leave the North Annex building, equipment, all research accounts, and patents under my name. I leave the undeveloped 40 acres behind the orchard, the soil records, and the deed to the Whitlow lab property. I trust you'll know what to do. My mother's breath caught. My father sat forward, as if to interrupt, but Ms. Donnelly continued. To be clear, these assets are not part of the primary estate. They were transferred to a private trust 2 years ago under Eleanor's name. As of today, that trust activates in full. A sharp scraping sound split the room, Sienna's chair dragging back an inch on the marble floor. What she said, voice brittle. You're giving her the lab, the land, that's not fair. You, she looked to our parents, panicked. You told me everything was handled, that if I stayed close, showed up, smiled, it would all... She stopped herself. Too late. Ms. Donnelly folded the letter and returned it to its envelope. Walter's instructions were specific. No contests, no rewrites. I looked across the table at Sienna, whose mascara had started to run at the corners. She looked less like the face of a lifestyle empire, and more like a child who'd just been told the party wasn't for her. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice. It was clarity. And in that moment, I finally understood what it meant to inherit something real. I drove out to the annex the next morning before sunrise. The highway curved west through the valley, then split into a gravel path so narrow I almost missed the turn. Trees hung low overhead, filtering dawn into slanted amber light. When I finally saw it just beyond the orchard's edge, I pulled over and sat in the car for a long time, keys still in the ignition, unsure what I'd find behind that weathered door. The building looked like an old barn with cedar siding and wide beams bleached soft by time. A slate plaque above the door read, "The Whitlow Research Annex, Este 2019. I stepped inside. The air held that clean scent only new equipment and old wood can make together. Sunlight poured through the high glass windows, illuminating rows of untouched lab benches, soil centrifuges, microscopes, boxes, still labeled in my name. Along the far wall, 3 floor-to-ceiling shelves held field journals, seed archives, and something that nearly made my knees buckle. A leather-bound notebook, faded green cover, my handwriting. It was the one I kept during grad school lost during a cross-state move, or so I thought. Inside were my early sketches on pollinator memory and root signaling. I flipped to a page and saw his scrawl in the margin test again in low humidity. Don't dismiss anomaly. I sat on the floor and let my back rest against the wood notebook pressed to my chest. He hadn't just left me equipment or land. He'd built me a place where being quiet wasn't a disadvantage, where no one would ask me to be more presentable or more engaging or more like Sienna. I thought I would cry, but the tears never came. Instead, there was stillness, a kind I hadn't known since childhood, when I would lie on the porch next to him while he sipped coffee and watched the wind move through the grass. That afternoon, I found the old property ledger tucked in a locked cabinet. Alongside the land deeds and research grants was a letter addressed in his hand for the first frost. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I took inventory. The lab was fully equipped solar-powered with its own modest living quarters in the back. A bed, a stove, a stack of coffee filters beside a chipped white kettle. I stayed the night. In the silence, I thought of how many times I'd tried to make my family proud. With academic awards, they never mentioned job offers. They forgot I'd accepted achievements that didn't fit into their online narrative. Here, none of that mattered. No filters, no brand deals, no curated grief. Just roots. I slept with the windows open, the wind cool against my skin. Somewhere outside, a cricket chirped twice, then stopped. And in that pause, I felt the land breathe. For the first time in years, it sounded like home. She showed up on a Wednesday. No warning, no entourage. Just a knock on the annex door sometime after 5, when the light was turning gold through the upper windows, and I was ankle-deep in compost samples. I almost didn't answer. But when I opened the door, Sienna stood there barefoot, her hair pulled into a loose braid, makeup-free eyes ringed with the kind of exhaustion you don't filter away. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She didn't thank me. She walked through the lab, slowly, eyes moving across the microscopes, the stacked journals, the seed trays under warm lamps. Her fingers grazed a rack of petri dishes, like she didn't know what they were for. Maybe she didn't. "This is what he built for you," she said almost to herself. I didn't answer. I watched her take it in the parts of him she'd never bothered to see, the rooms that smelled like fermentation and old paper instead of sage and lemon oil, the corners that weren't curated. "I didn't know," she said, finally turning to me, "about the trust, about the land, about any of it." I didn't believe her, but I didn't say that. "What did you think was going to happen?" I asked. "You'd smile for the camera, and the legacy would just fall into your lap." She winced like I'd slapped her. Then she sat on the edge of a lab stool and pulled something from her jacket pocket. A folded piece of printer paper. "They dropped me," she said. "All of them. Sponsors, affiliates. Even the garden show pulled my segment." She paused. "Apparently, grief doesn't convert to engagement anymore." I said nothing. "I was trying to hold it all together," she said, quieter now. "Keep the brand alive. Keep Mom and Dad afloat. You weren't around." I exhaled slowly, pressing my hands into the cold metal of the lab bench behind me. "I wasn't around because you locked the doors," I said. "Because you stood in front of them." She didn't argue. We sat in silence for a long time, the kind that felt more like a stalemate than a truce. Then she asked, "Do you need help?" I looked at her, really looked. No gloss, no ring light, just a sister who had run out of scripts. "I run a youth program here in the summer," I said. "We teach middle schoolers how to design their first soil trials." She blinked. "Middle schoolers. They're braver than you think. Sienna nodded slowly. I could help. Presentation skills, maybe? Public speaking, I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no. She left without another word. Still barefoot, still quiet. The next week, she came back. This time with her hair tied back, a thermos of coffee, and a notebook that had no logo on the front. She didn't take selfies. She took notes. I still didn't trust her, not fully. But I let her stay, because something in her had cracked, and because something in me had shifted. Not toward forgiveness, not yet, but toward permission, to build something without asking, to let the door stay unlocked just once. The envelope arrived with a thud legal weight paper, stiff with implication. My parents were contesting the trust. They claimed manipulation, mental decline, undue influence. I read it twice, then called Ms. Donnelly. She didn't sound surprised. When we met the next day, she already had the file open. Walter expected this, she said, sliding over a document. He left a video. On her office screen, my grandfather appeared. Thinner, eyes tired, but clear. If you're watching this, he said, someone's questioning my choices. So let me be plain. He spoke without anger, just resolve. I left the annex to Eleanor because she never asked for a spotlight, only a shovel. That land needs stewardship, not performance. I stared at the screen long after it ended. The hearing came fast. My parents filed on technical grounds, suggesting I'd pressured him, that he hadn't understood what he was signing, that I'd isolated him. Ms. Donnelly brought everything, the video-dated documents, signed ledgers. One showed my name added to the trust nearly 2 years before his passing, in Walter's own handwriting. The judge dismissed their claim in under 10 minutes. Afterward, outside the courthouse, my father lit a cigarette he didn't finish. My mother turned away before I could meet her eyes. I didn't follow them. They came for the land, the lab, the part of him still breathing. But none of it belonged to them. And for once, I didn't feel like I owed them an explanation. After the court hearing, the noise faded. The reporters moved on. The gossip blogs lost interest. What stayed was the land, the steady rhythm of watering cycles, compost rotations, and seedlings pushing up through dirt that remembered care more than names. I stayed busy. The first full session of the Youth Soil Initiative launched in April. 12 students, most of them from schools where science meant old posters and broken thermometers. We gave them real tools, real earth. They learned to test pH levels, chart root growth debate over fungal networks with more passion than I'd seen in some graduate labs. And in those muddy gloves and crooked data charts, something inside me repaired. Sienna came back. Not for show, not for redemption. Just quietly slipping into volunteer hours like she belonged. She helped the kids who froze when they had to speak, coached them through presentations, rewrote note cards with thick markers so the words felt less scary. One Thursday, I found her under the olive tree behind the greenhouse, reading aloud to a girl too anxious to read herself. Her voice was soft, measured, present. That evening, she handed me a manila folder. I wrote a speaking guide, she said, for the quiet ones. I took it without a word. We didn't call it forgiveness, but we didn't need to name it. Our parents never tried again. They sold what was left of their brand and moved to Arizona. I heard rumors of a cooking retreat, something about resetting midlife. I didn't follow up. Instead, I built forward. We broke ground on a new wing that fall, a teaching kitchen, and a soil research vault. Sienna offered to lead weekend classes for local families, helping them understand where food begins. She didn't record it. She just showed up. Sometimes after sunset, I walked to the far end of the annex fields to the cedar bench Walter carved decades ago. The sky opens above me, clean and blue-black, and I think of that letter he left, the one marked for the first frost. Build something that doesn't need your name to survive. I remember that line like breath. Looking out at the rows of student signs staked proudly in soft soil, I know this was never about being seen. It was about standing still long enough to take root. And finally I have. My name is Leah Cartwright, and on the morning my brother was promoted to commander of the Atlantic Strike Division, I stood outside the security gate like a stranger. The petty officer in charge tapped furiously on his tablet, squinting beneath the Virginia sun, trying to find my name. He wouldn't, because it wasn't there. Sorry, ma'am, he said with a practiced tone. You're not on the guest list for Commander Marcus Cartwright. I didn't flinch. I just adjusted the strap on my coat and nodded once. Behind him, the gates to the Grand Naval Parade grounds opened wide, letting in a sea of guests, retired officers in medals, families holding tiny flags, and somewhere among them, my own parents, smiling like nothing was wrong, like they hadn't just erased me. Again. Then Marcus arrived. White dress uniform. Impeccable smile. My brother, the family jewel, strode past without hesitation, glancing at me only long enough to murmur to his wife, just loud enough for me to hear. Leah forgot to RSVP. Some people never learn the chain of command. I almost laughed, because I had followed it, far longer than any of them knew. I stepped aside, let the crowd swallow them, and stood in the shadow of the stone gate invisible again, until a black government SUV pulled up, and the man who stepped out changed everything. Before you hear the whole story behind that moment, if you've ever been abandoned, hurt by your own family, and still forced to smile through it, leave a comment. I'm not telling this to complain, but because, maybe somewhere, you've felt what I felt. Now, let me take you back to where it all truly began. When I was 8, my father taught Marcus how to shine his boots until the leather looked like water. I sat on the steps holding the polished tin, hoping he'd ask me to try. He never did. At 12, I won the regional science fair. My project on sonar detection patterns earned a certificate, a ribbon, and a single nod from my homeroom teacher. At dinner that night, my mother barely looked up from her plate. Marcus had just passed his ROTC exam with top marks. He got a cake. I got silence. That's how it always was in our house. I wasn't unloved. I was undecorated. Too quiet, too cerebral, too hard to photograph. Marcus, on the other hand, was the kind of child you could put on a recruitment poster before he turned 15. Broad shoulders, confident grin, natural posture. I learned early not to compete. I just stepped out of frame. Still, I served. I graduated from Annapolis at 23. Quietly, I went into intelligence instead of command. Not flashy, but necessary. I specialized in asymmetric warfare, counter-infiltration modeling, and ironically, narrative suppression. While Marcus climbed through the visible ranks, I disappeared behind unmarked doors and classified seals. They thought I'd left the Navy. That was the part that stung the most, not that they ignored me, but that they assumed I'd quit, that I lacked what it took. Not once in 10 years had my father asked where I was stationed. Not once had Marcus reached out after hearing I transferred to the Pentagon. When the family spoke of the Cartwright legacy, they didn't mean me. They meant Marcus, the son, the commander. And yet when orders needed rewriting, when a task force went dark in the Gulf, when command centers scrambled at EO 200, the calls didn't go to Marcus. They went to me, but no one at that parade ground knew that. Not yet. So I stood by the gate coat-buttoned silver bars hidden beneath civilian gray and watched as my family walked past me like I was just another spectator. The petty officer gave me a look, apologetic, unsure, and offered me a clipboard. Maybe if you check in under another name, I smiled politely. That won't be necessary, because that was the moment the black SUV rolled to a stop beside us. It didn't rush. It didn't need to. The tinted window lowered with quiet finality, and the man inside gave the young sailor a nod. "Stand down, Ensign," he said. "She's not on your list because her clearance outranks yours." Then he stepped out. Admiral Rayburn, steel-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing the kind of silence that quieted entire rooms. He looked directly at me and extended his hand, not in greeting, but in respect. "Admiral Cartwright," he said, voice low and level, "we were starting to think you'd skip your brother's big day." I didn't answer him right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because for a moment I forgot how to breathe. Admiral Rayburn had just said my name and title loud enough for the crowd near the entrance to hear. And they did. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. The young petty officer who had tried so earnestly to check me in went pale. His hand twitched around the clipboard, then dropped it entirely. "Admiral," he stammered, I wasn't informed. You weren't supposed to be." Rayburn said, his voice firm, but not unkind. "Proceed." He turned to me and gestured forward. "Shall we?" I nodded once, then unfastened my coat. The cool spring air brushed against my uniform, revealing the deep navy of formal dress and the twin stars on either shoulder gun. Gasps rippled through the front of the procession. I didn't flinch. I let the fabric fall back just enough to catch the sunlight. Rayburn fell into step beside me, and we crossed the threshold together. On the other side of the gate, it was like stepping into a stage. Rows of crisp white chairs flanked a polished walkway. Military brass mingled with retired dignitaries. A photographer turned instinctively when he saw us, then lowered his camera just as fast when he recognized the stars. Not Marcus's stars, mine. I could feel the weight of my parents' gaze before I saw them. My mother, pristine in a cream blazer, her pearls perfectly matched to her soft pink lipstick, blinked twice before her posture stiffened. My father, dressed in his old Navy captain's uniform, squinted like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Then I saw Marcus. He was standing near the stage, laughing with two younger officers. He looked like someone who had prepared for a spotlight his whole life and was just now realizing it was being pulled in another direction. Our eyes met. His jaw tensed. His smile faltered. He turned slightly, leaning toward his wife Lauren, and whispered something too quiet to hear. She followed his gaze. Her perfectly manicured brows lifted. I watched her lips part as she realized who I was. Not Leah, the forgotten sister. Leah Cartwright, Admiral of the Naval Cyber Intelligence Division. Rayburn leaned in. Front row left. Your seat is reserved. Follow me. I didn't hesitate. As we walked, I noticed how officers shifted aside, some saluting others, just stepping out of the way. I caught the murmurs as we passed short, clipped phrases like, "She outranks half the board," and "Did you know she was coming?" I walked with a posture squared, each step measured not out of pride, but precision. When we reached the front row, a junior lieutenant stood and snapped to attention, eyes wide. He hadn't expected anyone outranking Rear Admiral Fletcher to sit here. Rayburn simply nodded, and the young officer stepped aside. I sat, not in defiance, not in rebellion, but in full earned authority. And as I settled into the seat, shoulders back, eyes forward, the band struck the first note of the national anthem. I didn't look back, because for the first time, they would have to look at me. The ceremony unfolded with all the precision of a naval chronograph. Opening remarks, flag presentations, acknowledgments from high command. I heard it all, but none of it truly registered. My attention drifted not to the program, but to the subtle currents shifting around me. From the corner of my eye, I caught Marcus glancing over. Not often, just enough to confirm I was still there. His posture was perfect, but his jaw flexed every few minutes, a micro-adjustment he couldn't control. A tic I remembered from childhood. He always clenched his teeth when something didn't go according to script. And this was never in the script. When the time came, his name rang through the courtyard like a bell. Commander Marcus Cartwright, front and center. The crowd applauded, polite and proud. He rose, uniform, sharp, shoulders back, every inch the officer they had expected him to be. He accepted his commendation from Vice Admiral Nash, shook hands, saluted. All textbook. Then came the speech. He stepped to the podium, cleared his throat, and smiled. Not quite as easily as he had earlier. I'm honored he began to accept this promotion on behalf of every mentor, peer, and leader who believed in the chain of command and the responsibility it carries. Applause. He thanked his unit, his superiors, and his peers. Then his tone softened. And of course, I owe everything to the people who shaped me, long before the Navy ever did. The family segment. I want to thank my wife Lauren for standing by me through every posting and deployment, for keeping our home grounded when I was thousands of miles away. Polite laughter, a few nods. My mother, Eleanor Cartwright, who taught me that discipline and grace are not opposites, but companions. She smiled, ever composed. And my father, Captain Thomas Cartwright, whose leadership taught me the difference between power and purpose. He paused then, the kind of pause that stretched longer than it should. Silence crept in. He looked up, and for the first time his eyes locked on mine. It lasted less than a second, but in that flicker of recognition, I saw everything: the confusion, the tension, the rewiring of his entire internal order. And then he looked away, swallowed. For everyone who has served before me and alongside me, he continued, forcing the words out with an audible shift. Thank you for your service, your example, and your sacrifice. There it was. No mention of me, not a name, not a title. Just that brittle silence again, now dressed in ceremonial ribbons. But I didn't need his speech. because my name had already arrived long before he opened his mouth. And when he stepped off that podium, the applause was dutiful. But it wasn't just for him anymore. After the ceremony, the crowd spilled onto the reception lawn, like champagne foam, bright noisy, a bit oversweet. Families posed in clusters, photographers snapped away, brass plates clinked softly on linen-covered tables. I remained near the perimeter, not hiding, but observing. Old habit. Besides, I was waiting. I knew he'd come. And he did. Marcus approached alone. No fanfare, no camera-ready grin. Just a man walking toward a question he didn't know how to form. He stopped 2 steps away. The look on his face was tight, like someone realizing he's been reading the wrong script for years. "Admiral Cartwright," he said. I returned his nod. "Commander?" He tried to smile, but it faltered halfway. "I didn't know," he said, quiet, but edged. "No one told me you were still in service," I offered. "Still relevant, still existing." His jaw tightened. "I thought you left after Annapolis. No one. You never said anything." I held his gaze. "You never asked." He looked away, hands sliding into the pockets of his dress blues. "You could have told us. Would it have mattered?" He didn't answer. I took a breath. Not angry, just clear. "You had a version of me that worked for you. Quiet civilian background, easy to manage. I let you keep it. That was my mistake." He blinked. I continued softer now. "You wanted the spotlight. I didn't. But don't mistake silence for absence." Something shifted then, not big, not cinematic, just a flicker. His mouth opened like he was about to argue, but nothing came. Instead, he asked, "Why today?" Why now I looked past him toward the flag still fluttering above the stage. Because it was time. Because sometimes the truth doesn't need permission to arrive. His lips parted again, and this time the question was more fragile. That operation in the Gulf, last year, my carrier was rerouted mid-mission. Intel came in less than 6 minutes before deployment. "You were—" "Yes," I said simply. "That was me." He exhaled slowly. "You saved lives." "I did my job." A beat of silence passed between us, heavier than the years ever were. Then he said the only thing that mattered. "Thank you." I nodded, and for a moment neither of us moved. He wasn't my enemy, not really. He was just raised in the same mirror I had shattered my way out of. He stepped back, offered a sharp salute. This time the formality wasn't performative. It was respect. I returned it without hesitation. Then I turned and walked away, not triumphant, not wounded, just steady. Because the version of me they ignored had just walked into the daylight, and I wasn't going back. 3 days later, I was in Washington. The air inside the Pentagon was colder than usual, filtered, clinical, detached. But I liked it that way. It made focus easier. The concrete of hierarchy was always less personal here. People didn't ask where you came from. They asked what you could carry. Admiral Rayburn called me into a secure conference room. No preamble, no smile, just a thick manila folder slid across the table with my name in bold. Cartwright. "They want you to lead the Pacific Hybrid Operations Unit." I raised an eyebrow. I thought they were grooming someone else for that seat. "They were," he said. "Until last week." Inside the folder were charts, satellite overlays, strategic gaps between joint forces. The job wasn't just about intel anymore. It was cyber counter-response infiltration, redundancy, essentially the future. Congratulations. Rayburn added, "You're the new blueprint." I leaned back slightly, the leather chair creaking beneath my shoulders. "What about JSC?" I asked. "I thought they'd earmarked me for strategic command integration." He smirked. They had. Then someone showed them what happens when you show up at a parade and reset a family narrative in real time. I paused, thumb brushing the edge of the page. "This comes with resistance." "All revolutions do," he replied. I closed the folder and looked him square in the eye. "I'm not here for a revolution." "You're having one anyway," he said. "You just do it quieter than most." That night, I returned to my apartment, overlooking the river. Lights shimmered across the water. I could see the silhouettes of carriers in the shipyard far below, waiting for orders, waiting for movement. I poured myself a glass of water. No celebration, no phone call home. Instead, I stood at the window and whispered the title out loud. Commander of Pacific Hybrid Operations. It didn't feel heavy, it felt earned. And that's when the message came in. From an encrypted line I hadn't used in over a year. Marcus. Simple, direct. Can we meet? We did the next morning. In a quiet cafe in Arlington. Civilian clothes, no insignia, no crowd. He arrived first, no swagger. Just a man who looked like he'd started seeing things differently. They offered me a liaison role, he said. Under your command. I stirred my coffee. Are you here to decline it? No, he said. I asked for it. That caught me off guard. I want to be where the right decisions are being made, he added. Where I can learn. I studied him for a long moment. Not searching for sincerity, just wondering how long it had been buried. You sure you're okay working under your younger sister? I asked. He smiled sheepish, but real. I'm not sure I deserve the spot. But I know I'll be proud to serve in your chain of command. I nodded. Then let's get to work. And just like that, we stopped being a competition. We became a command. A week later, my mother invited me to dinner. No pretense, no occasion. Just a text that read, Sunday at 6, just us. Marcus will be there. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Not because I didn't know what to say, because for the first time I didn't need the invitation, but I accepted. When I pulled into the driveway that Sunday, the house looked the same. Brick siding clean, hedges the flagpole still standing perfectly straight by the porch. But something was different. Maybe it was me. Marcus answered the door. No uniform this time. Just sleeves rolled to his elbows, setting the table like it was something he'd always done. You're on time, he said. You're early, I replied. We both smiled soft and simple. Inside, the smell of roast chicken and rosemary floated through the air. My mother moved between the kitchen and dining room like she was performing a familiar dance, but this time she wasn't rushing. She wasn't correcting. She just let it be. My father stood at the head of the table when I entered. He didn't speak at first, just nodded. Then, after a pause, he reached out his hand not stiffly, not ceremonially, but like he meant it. Welcome home, Admiral, he said. The words settled in the air like warm ash quiet, but impossible to ignore. Dinner was steady. We talked about logistics deployment updates, upcoming joint drills. My mother asked questions not to sound informed, but because she was curious. No one mentioned the parade. No one needed to. Over dessert, a simple peach cobbler, my father set down his fork and cleared his throat. It was the kind of sound that once silenced rooms. You'll be the highest-ranking Cartwright in 4 generations. I didn't respond immediately. I didn't need to. He continued, You didn't inherit that. You built it, and I was wrong not to see it. My mother reached across the table and gently touched my hand. We were all wrong, she said softly, but we see it now. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time there was no performance behind her eyes. Just clarity. Across the table, Marcus raised his glass. To the sister who rewrote the standard. And for once, no one corrected him. We finished dinner without ceremony. The plates were cleared, the lights dimmed, and for a long moment we just sat. Not as a family trying to fix the past, but as people quietly acknowledging a truth that had lived too long in the dark. Later, as I stood in the doorway, ready to leave, my father clapped a hand on my shoulder. You made the name mean something again, he said. I looked him in the eye. No, I replied. I gave it something it never had. He didn't argue. He just nodded. 1 month after the promotion, I stood before my new office at the Pentagon. The plaque on the door read, Vice Admiral Leah Cartwright, Director of Pacific Hybrid Operations. It looked simple, understated, but it was the culmination of every moment I had once lived in silence. Inside, the air was different. Advisors spoke slower when I entered. Senior officers adjusted posture, not from protocol, but instinct. My name no longer traveled through back channels. It led meetings, signed off directives, and reshaped how command itself operated. Then the White House summoned me. The president herself, a former Navy veteran, had asked for a direct briefing. Indo-Pacific Joint Force posture, escalation modeling, cyber breach containment. I delivered it in 34 minutes. No slides, no fluff, just clarity. When I finished, the room was still. The kind of still that doesn't question. That waits. The Secretary of Defense spoke first. Admiral Cartwright, this isn't just operational foresight. It's doctrine-level thinking. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs added, We've had admirals before, but never one who rewrote the playbook mid-game. I gave a small nod. No thanks, no false humility, just acknowledgement, because I had earned it. That night, I walked along the Navy Yard alone. The water was quiet. The silhouettes of ships floated in the harbor like sentinels watching remembering. My phone buzzed. Marcus! A photo appeared my image on a new recruitment banner, stationed outside our old high school. Full uniform eyes forward, captioned in clean bold font, earned, not inherited. Then his message followed. They're quoting you now, Leah. Everywhere, you're not just a story, you're a signal. I stood there for a long time watching the reflection of the ship lights shimmer across the pavement. Then I replied, then let's make sure the signal leads somewhere worth following. Because in the end, I hadn't fought for a seat at their table. I had built a new one and left the door open, not for them, but for whoever came next. My name is Eleanor Fay. I'm 44 years old. I served 20 years in the United States Air Force and retired as a lieutenant colonel in Operations Command. I've navigated live combat transport routes through Eastern Africa and weather diversion zones across the North Pacific. But nothing prepared me for Gate 17A at SkyWest International 5 minutes before sunrise. I stood alone back straight in civilian clothes that didn't give me away. Across the glass, I saw my mother struggling with the kiosk, my sister growing flustered, my father speaking with a gate agent who kept shaking her head. The words were clear even from a distance. Your names aren't on the manifest. The world didn't stop. Families wheeled suitcases past me. A toddler screamed nearby. But for a moment, time felt still. 2 days earlier, my sister had texted, "You're not coming. Mom prefers close family." I had responded, "Understood. Good luck." What they didn't know, what they never saw coming, was that I had paid for everything. The plane tickets, the house on the beach, even the goddamn insurance. And now I had removed their names. I wasn't there to cause a scene. I was there to observe the one they scripted without me. Before you hear the whole story behind that moment, if you've ever been abandoned, hurt by your own family, and still forced to smile through it, leave a comment. I'm not telling this to complain, but because, maybe somewhere, you've felt what I felt. Now, let me take you back to where it all truly began. I didn't throw my phone when I read that message. I didn't cry or scream or pace the kitchen. I just sat there staring at the screen. You're not coming. Mom prefers close family. It was short, clinical, no punctuation, not even the courtesy of an excuse. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was familiar. That kind of familiar that doesn't surprise you anymore, just confirms something you stopped admitting years ago. I'd spent the last 6 months planning that trip. Quietly, deliberately, I booked everything under a military group travel benefit, using my clearance to unlock early fares and base lodging discounts. The villa in Lanikai had 3 bedrooms, 2 balconies, and an outdoor fire pit. I even prepaid the gas on the rental car, $11,406 pulled from my retirement savings. I didn't tell anyone what it cost me because I thought maybe, just maybe, it would buy back something they never gave willingly: belonging. It wasn't the first time I'd done this. I had a long history of underwriting holidays, fixing booking errors, covering for forgotten expenses. In my family, I was never the guest. I was the quiet sponsor in the background, the one who remembered when the electric bill was due, who overnighted the textbook Melody left at home, who paid off the balance on Mom's dental plan when insurance didn't. None of it was ever acknowledged. Gratitude wasn't our language, it was assumed necessity. Still, when the text came, it felt like something finally snapped clean. Not out of anger, not even sadness, just clarity. I'd been erased not just from a trip, but from the narrative. Again. I typed back, "Understood, good luck," and meant every word. But I didn't delete the itinerary. I didn't cancel the bookings. I logged in. The group travel interface greeted me with my old call sign, Lieutenant Call Fay. It was a quiet relic of a life I'd left, but it still worked. The manifest had changed. My name had been marked inactive. 3 other names, Melody, our parents, and someone named Rebecca L., had been added as new travelers, all under my authorization. The timestamps told their own story. The edits were made 2 nights ago, from an IP address at Melody's university office. I sat still. No breath, no emotion, just stillness. She used my access. She took what I gave her once for a scholarship verification and used it to lock me out of my own generosity. But this time, she made a mistake. She left the door unlocked, and I still had the master key. I clicked private access mode. The system blinked once, then confirmed editing rights restricted. Only verified administrator can modify manifest. I leaned back in the chair. Coffee cold. The message from Melody still open. Mom prefers close family. I had finally decided I did too. And apparently, I wasn't part of theirs. I didn't go to sleep that night. Not because I was upset, because I was calculating. There's something about military life that changes your instincts. You stop reacting. You start recording, documenting, verifying. I learned early on that emotion gets you hurt, but proof keeps you alive. So I retraced every step. The reservation platform showed an unauthorized extension, 30 additional nights added to the villa booking after I'd paid for the original week. A document had been uploaded confirming the lease. It bore my name, my old military ID number, and even my electronic signature. I hadn't signed anything. Whoever did it was good. They routed the signature verification through a masked browser certificate, mimicked my initials, and even tagged the timestamp to match a believable workflow. But they weren't good enough. Metadata doesn't lie. I opened the file properties. Author R. Lindsay, device MacBook Air, location Berkeley, California, my sister's roommate from undergrad, now working as a junior paralegal in a firm that specialized in estate contracts. I remembered her. Quiet, observant. Always knew how to insert herself into family matters without leaving fingerprints. But this time, she left plenty. The fraud wasn't just a signature. It was federal impersonation. My military ID had been used to secure benefits and override payment flags. It fell under Title 18, Section 1001. I knew the number by heart. I used to teach this in logistics compliance briefings, back when people still called me ma'am. Still, I didn't call Melody. I didn't text Becca. I didn't rage or accuse. I opened a blank report and typed slowly. To the Department of Defense Legal Oversight Unit, I believe my retired credentials have been misused by an unauthorized civilian for the purpose of forging federal travel documents. I'm requesting verification and potential security review. I attached the documents, the PDF contract, the altered booking, manifest, the IP logs, and the signature file. Each one named clearly. I didn't editorialize. I didn't explain. The system doesn't need emotion. It needs accuracy. When I hit submit, a confirmation code appeared. The kind only people in my old field understand, the kind that triggers internal triage systems without alerting the outer world. Then I closed the laptop and went to the kitchen, made eggs, toasted bread, poured a fresh cup of coffee, and sat by the window. My dog wandered in and sat at my feet. I looked at her, then out at the pale sky rising over the lawn. They thought I wouldn't notice, that I'd stay erased, that silence meant surrender. But silence in my world is often the first step in repositioning. I wasn't seeking revenge. That's not what this was. It was just time they learned when you weaponize someone's loyalty, you don't get to be shocked when they stop offering it. They didn't just exclude me. They used me. And now the system they manipulated was going to respond with the same quiet, methodical precision I had spent 2 decades perfecting. The terminal smelled like citrus disinfectant and overbrewed coffee. I arrived early, earlier than necessary. Old habits. I wore a black windbreaker jeans and running shoes. Nothing remarkable. No insignia, no pins, no trace of rank. Just another traveler waiting for a gate to open. I took a seat across from 17A, back to the window, face turned toward the main kiosk. From there, I had a clear view of the check-in line. The boarding monitors above scrolled through final calls. Flight 1279 to Oahu, on time. Boarding Group A in 22 minutes. And then they arrived. Melody appeared first, dragging a blush-pink suitcase that looked brand new. Her hair-curled sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Behind her, Mom fanned herself with a boarding pass printout, already annoyed. Dad lagged just slightly, staring into his phone like it owed him peace. They moved through the crowd with the ease of people who expected things to go smoothly. I took a sip of my coffee. Melody reached the kiosk, tapped the screen quickly. Her fingers moved with casual confidence. Then they paused. She tapped again. Slower, then again. Harder. A beep. Then another. She leaned toward Mom, who frowned and stepped in typing something herself. Another beep. That's when the gate agent stepped from behind the desk. Her name tag read K. Morales. She had the look of someone who had handled far worse than a delayed family of 3, but wasn't in the mood to do it politely. I liked her immediately. "Ma'am," she said to Mom, "I'll need to verify your reservation. Can I see your confirmation number?" Melody held up her phone. Morales scanned the screen, typed something, and stopped. Her brow twitched. "These tickets were flagged," she said evenly. "I need to escalate this to a supervisor." Dad looked up for the first time. Flagged. What does that mean? It means, Morales replied without blinking, they were removed from the manifest under a Department of Defense override. Everything after that moved in slow motion. Melody's mouth parted like she'd been slapped. Mom's fingers tightened around her printed ticket. Dad finally stepped forward, trying to speak, but no sound came out. A TSA officer appeared silently behind them, whispering something to Morales. I stood, tossed my cup into the bin, and turned slowly toward Gate 19. I didn't need to witness the rest, but I heard it anyway. "She booked the tickets," Melody's voice cracked behind me. "We're family. There has to be a mistake." "There's no mistake," Morales said, voice calm. "You were passengers on an itinerary paid for by another party. That party rescinded authorization. Someone else said something, maybe Dad. But by then I was already walking down the next corridor. Past duty-free shelves, past mothers zipping jackets, past a couple arguing over a carry-on. I didn't look back. Because this wasn't a movie. There was no final confrontation, no shouting match or public breakdown. There was just policy, documentation, the quiet sound of a system correcting itself. And behind me, somewhere beyond the security glass, 3 people were finally facing a version of the truth I'd lived in silence for years. They had erased me. I had returned the favor, not with malice, but with precision. The official notice came 3 days later, not by phone, not by email. A hard copy envelope postmarked from the Office of Civilian Oversight Department of Justice. Inside a suspension letter, Rebecca Lindsay Jr. Paralegal Berkeley had been removed from all active casework pending federal review. Unauthorized use of military identification, forgery of a protected signature, possible identity fraud. It wasn't a court sentence, but in her world, it might as well have been. I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumphant. Just settled. There were no calls from Melody, no voicemails, no late-night texts begging to explain. Just one email. The subject line read, "About the Airbnb." Her tone was familiar, passive, polished. I didn't realize the extension counted as federal. I thought Becca had it covered. "We didn't mean for it to go this far, but the host won't refund the deposit since your profile signed the long-term rental. Could you help with the reimbursement?" She ended with, "Since it was under your name." I printed it, folded it, and slid it into an envelope with a single handwritten note. Trust is not refundable. No return address, no signature. Just mailed it to her last known apartment. I don't know what she did with it, shredded it maybe, or rolled her eyes and tossed it into the recycling bin. Maybe she showed it to Mom. Maybe they laughed. Maybe they didn't. It didn't matter. What mattered was that for once I didn't explain. I didn't defend. I didn't fix it for them. After that, the digital unraveling began. Quietly, without ceremony. Our old family group chat went dark. No new memes, no forwarded articles, no 6 a.m. motivational quotes from Mom. Streaming accounts removed their names. Family plan notifications expired. Melody's profile icon vanished from the shared grocery list app. I didn't delete them. The system did. And for the first time in decades, I didn't step in to reset the password or smooth things over. I let the pieces fall. Because the scaffolding was never mine to carry alone. They came home from the airport 3 days early. No sunburns, no island photos. Just pale faces and radio silence. My neighbor said she saw them arguing in the driveway. Word got around fast. Suburbs never miss a beat. Someone posted a cryptic comment online. Guess the trip didn't happen after all. I didn't respond. Because silence, when chosen not forced, is its own kind of reclamation. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't being quiet out of fear. I was quiet because there was nothing left to explain. The invitation arrived on a Thursday. Cream cardstock crisp edges the seal of the United States Department of Defense embossed in silver. It was addressed to me not as someone's daughter or sister, but as Lieutenant Colonel Eleanor Faye Rhett. Inside was a formal nomination. I had been selected as a mentor for the Valor Women Command Initiative, a leadership program for female officers transitioning into high command roles across all branches of the military. It wasn't just ceremonial, it was selective, prestigious, rare. And the nomination didn't come from a form or a random selection board. It came from three women I hadn't seen in over a decade: General Abigail Maris, Commander Thea Rodriguez, and Colonel Dana Willoughby. I remembered all of them. Mud-caked boots in Afghanistan, wind-burned skin during night ops and Alaska briefings held under emergency lighting. We'd crossed paths when none of us had anything to prove, only work to do. In the margin of the letter, one of them had written by hand, "You didn't just complete the mission, Faye. You remained whole. That's what we need our next leaders to see." I didn't respond right away. I left the letter on the kitchen table for 3 days, let it sit among the quiet. I watered the rosemary, folded laundry, read the same paragraph of a novel 3 times. I wasn't ignoring it, I was letting it take root. Because it wasn't about career. It wasn't even about validation. It was about being seen. Not as the backup, not as the helper, not as the one who remembers birthdays or covers hotel deposits, but as the woman who endured and still stood. When I finally said yes, I didn't say it with ambition. I said it with clarity. The first gathering was held in D.C., in a low-lit conference hall lined with portraits of women who came before us, pilots, engineers, commanders. I arrived in uniform, pressed, unadorned, no frills, just presence. A young captain, couldn't have been more than 30, stood up when I entered. She didn't salute. She didn't smile. She just said, "Ma'am, thank you for staying long enough for the rest of us to see you." I nodded. My throat tightened. Not from pride, but recognition. Later, as we sat in a circle sharing why we'd come, I didn't start with my rank. I started with my truth. Sometimes I told them loyalty isn't about staying silent to keep the peace. Sometimes it's about saying no, quietly, clearly, and letting that be the boundary. They didn't clap. They didn't need to. They just listened like they understood. Because they did. They'd all stood alone once too. And now we didn't have to anymore. I eventually made it to Hawaii. Not with my family, but with 5 women who understood what family wasn't. We didn't come for Mai Tais or beachfront selfies. We came for something quieter, older. A reclaiming. Each of us had worn the uniform. Each of us had been praised in public and dismissed in private. Called too rigid, too direct, too much. But still, we'd stayed. For the mission. For each other. For the ones who couldn't. That evening, we gathered on a stretch of dark sand near Kaina Point. The wind moved in slow breaths. The tide reached and receded, like it too had something to let go. We didn't speak much, just sat barefoot, knees tucked, the fire pit crackling low. Someone passed around a box of long-stemmed candles. No one explained why. No one needed to. Lyra lit hers first for the years she'd spent being told she was just a medic. Shonda followed for the fiancé, who said he couldn't marry someone harder than him. Then came Ava, whose family stopped speaking to her after she came out. Then Talaya, who lost custody of her son because her ex said war made her unstable. And Miriam, the oldest among us, whose hands trembled when she struck her match, but held steady when she whispered for every woman who stayed standing when she should have crumbled. I held my candle last. I thought of the forged signature, the erased reservation, the decades of being the invisible backbone, the vacation I wasn't welcome on, the leadership role I had to earn twice over because I never asked for credit. Then I thought of the girl I used to be, the one who packed her own duffel at 17 and waited on the porch alone while the rest of the family had brunch. I lit my candle for her. We didn't blow the flames out. We let the wind decide. Later, I walked the shore alone, barefoot, the sand cool underfoot. I didn't feel the sting of rejection anymore. Only the weight of quiet that didn't ache. A silence that didn't hurt. Because this time, I hadn't just shown up. I had chosen to return. There's a rhythm to peace I didn't understand until I stopped bracing for impact. Mornings are slow now. I take my coffee with a splash of milk, no sugar. My porch faces east, where the light breaks in soft. I planted desert sage and snapdragons along the walkway last spring. They bloomed late, but they bloomed. Some afternoons, I get postcards from the women in the program. From Okinawa. From Stuttgart. One even wrote from Antarctica. They always start with ma'am, but sometimes they end with mom. It makes me smile, not because I ever wanted children, but because maybe in a different way I've raised something after all. Courage, voice, boundary, legacy. That word used to sound like marble statues and medals in locked glass. But legacy, I've learned, is what you build quietly. What survives the people who tried to write over you. It's not about proving anyone wrong, it's about staying right with yourself. The Department of Defense eventually sent me an internal update. Just a small one. Routine. They'd archived the travel incident, confirmed my ID was restored, flagged accounts closed, military protections reinstated. But what caught my eye wasn't the technical report. It was the closing note from an officer I'd never met. Thank you for your integrity. We don't often get reports written that clearly, that calmly, that thoroughly. I didn't write back, but I whispered something to myself in the quiet of the living room, holding the envelope with 2 hands. That's what they never understood. It was never about the drama. It was about the documentation. It was about drawing the line and not stepping back from it when they cried foul. The family group thread I'd left months ago stayed silent. No one re-added me. No one checked in. And maybe for once they were learning something too. That silence can be both wound and boundary. That just because I didn't scream didn't mean I hadn't heard everything. Sometimes people think power is loud, assertive, dominant. But I've seen the kind that doesn't flinch when cornered, doesn't collapse when erased. And that kind, it doesn't come from rage. It comes from surviving disappointment long enough to turn it into architecture. One night not long ago, I lit a single candle. No ritual, no speech, just stillness. I watched the flame stretch and settle. I thought of Melody, of Becca, of my mother's narrowed eyes across so many holiday tables, of every time they used me as scaffolding and assumed I'd stay. But most of all, I thought of the girl I used to be, age 10, left at home while everyone else went to brunch. The girl who set her own alarm, who read quietly, who waited without being seen. I didn't rescue her. I became her again. Only this time, I stayed. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not arriving at joy, but returning to wholeness. Quietly, firmly, and never needing permission again. My name is Rachel Donovan. I'm 34 years old, and I know exactly what humiliation tastes like. It's the metallic sting of your father's hand across your face, in front of 60 people you once called family. But worse, much worse, is the sound that came after. Not gasps, not silence. Applause. It started with my sister. One deliberate clap, slow and sharp, like she was signaling the others. Then came the ripple-measured, polite complicit. They clapped like I'd finally done what they always expected me to do, break. Vera didn't look away when our father hit me. She smiled. It was a family celebration, they said. A toast to legacy. A gathering to honor all we'd built. But that was a lie. What they really built was a script, and the only thing I did wrong was step off it. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I walked out with my cheek burning and my spine intact. I drove 2 hours in silence, watching the sun dip behind the tree line, like it couldn't bear to look me in the eye. When I got home, I made one call. Just one. And everything they thought they'd taken my silence, my name, my place, started slipping through their fingers. They thought the worst part was done. That I'd disappear the way they wanted me to. What they didn't know was this: I never planned to fight them. I only planned to finish what they started. Before you hear the whole story behind that moment, if you've ever been abandoned, hurt by your own family, and still forced to smile through it, leave a comment. I'm not telling this to complain, but because, maybe somewhere, you've felt what I felt. Now, let me take you back to where it all truly began. It came on a Tuesday. I remember because the dog had just knocked over his water bowl for the 3rd time that week, and I was kneeling on the kitchen floor, towel in hand, when my phone lit up. The subject line read, Donovan Family Legacy Celebration, 10 years of growth. No hi Rachel, no dear family member, just a blocky serif font and a signature line from Vera and Wendell, like it was a real estate flyer, not a message from my own sister. I stared at the screen for longer than I should have. Not because it hurt, though it did, but because I kept waiting for something more. A PS, a line that said, hope you can come. Instead, there was just the address, the date, and the implication: show up or stay forgotten. I hadn't spoken to Vera in months. After the way she brushed off my last call about the cabin maintenance, I stopped trying. But I called her anyway. She picked up on the second ring, her voice bright and unbothered, like she was pouring a mimosa poolside. Rachel, oh my God, were your ears burning? I was just talking about you. I didn't return the energy, got your invitation, didn't see my name. She let out a short laugh, airy and dismissive. Totally a formatting thing. Those Evite templates are awful. You know how it is. Do I? She steamrolled right past the question. It's nothing fancy, just a backyard thing. Food, some speeches. You know, family love and all that. Family love. I didn't say much more. We exchanged a few pleasantries before I hung up. I could have said no, should have, but I didn't. Instead, I spent Thursday evening making a photo collage. Vera's kids as toddlers, our parents before the bitterness set in one old picture of the two of us in high school arms, looped like we didn't know how far apart we'd grow. I boxed it carefully layered tissue between the frames. Added a pillow my mother sewed years ago, cross-stitched with flowers, the kind of delicate work her hands haven't been steady enough to do in over a decade. It had sat in my guest room untouched. I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would care. On Saturday morning, I loaded the car. Finn, my shepherd mix, jumped into the passenger seat without hesitation. Head out the window before we left the driveway. He always knew when I was holding something I hadn't named yet. The drive to Charlotte was long but quiet. The closer we got, the tighter my grip on the wheel. I didn't have a plan. I just had a sinking feeling I'd packed more than a box and a dog. I'd packed all the pieces they pretended no longer existed. Vera's house sat on a cul-de-sac where everything looked copy-pasted. Same beige vinyl siding, same trimmed hedges, same flags fluttering on identical mailboxes. There were already rows of cars along the curb when I pulled in. I parked 2 blocks down and walked the rest of the way with the gift box in my arms, nodding at a few strangers standing outside. None of them nodded back. The backyard had been dressed like a wedding that didn't quite believe in intimacy. White tense mason jars with cut flower string lights arching above rental tables. A young woman I didn't recognize stood at the welcome station. She handed me a plastic badge with a number printed on it. Hi guest number 21. Welcome. I blinked. I'm Rachel, Vera's sister. Her smile faltered. Oh, sorry, we just used the list we were given. Of course they had. I slipped the badge into my bag without another word. The conversations swirled around me, like smoke softball leagues, orthodontist referrals, whose kid got into what charter school. No one looked up when I walked past. No one said my name. Then I saw the photo wall. 10 feet wide, backlit with fairy lights. It read, 10 years of Donovan legacy. There were dozens of pictures. Vera's wedding, her children's birthdays, Dad fishing with Wendell, Mom holding a pie I had baked but cropped, so only the crust showed. I scanned every inch of that wall for a sliver of myself. I wasn't there, not once. I turned and stepped back instinctively, bumping into a woman near the drinks. She looked at me and asked, "Are you one of the cousins?" I smiled not kindly. "No, I'm the sister." Her expression stiffened, then she nodded like she'd made a mistake she wasn't willing to admit. I placed the gift on the table near the bar. Moments later, a teenage boy swept by and nudged it beneath the tablecloth. Out of sight. I found my mother by the lemonade station. "Hi, Mom," she gave me a once-over. "You made it." No hug, no smile. Just an eye-roll glance toward the rest of the yard. Dad appeared beside her. "Rachel," he said, flat and efficient, like reading a name off a clipboard. He reached for a soda without making eye contact. No one asked how I was. No one asked anything at all. By the time dinner was served, I was seated at a plastic folding table, shoved behind the grill tent next to a speaker stand, and just a few feet from the portable restroom. Every speech came and went without mention of me. My badge number never changed. I smiled when I was supposed to. I clapped on cue. But something inside me was curling in on itself, not because I was surprised, because I finally understood they hadn't just forgotten me. They had erased me. The sun had just begun to dip when Vera stood and tapped her wine glass. The chime rang out like a bell at a school assembly, sharp practiced, purposeful. The tablecloths fluttered in the soft breeze, and for a moment it almost looked like joy. Almost. I was seated near the back half, in shadow, half in steam from the buffet trays. The portable toilet behind me gave off a faint chemical scent that clung to the air like insult. I wasn't meant to be seen, only tolerated. Thank you all for being here. Vera began, her voice smooth, elevated, perfectly modulated for a microphone she didn't need. It means the world to our family to have you celebrate 10 beautiful years of growth, togetherness, and above all, legacy. Legacy. They always loved that word. It made theft sound poetic. She praised our parents, toasted Wendell's new business, even thanked their children for giving us a future worth building for. Then she turned. There's one more thing, she said. Her eyes landed on me, and her smile stretched like taffy, bright, tight, brittle. Rachel, would you mind joining us for a moment? Conversations quieted. Heads turned. I stood slowly, my hands clammy against the cold glass of water I'd been holding. I walked toward the center, unsure why my legs felt like anchors. Vera placed a hand gently on my back, like she was guiding me toward a medal ceremony. Then, with her eyes on the crowd, she said, Rachel has a beautiful cabin in the Rockies. Some of you have seen it in pictures. It's the perfect getaway. Peaceful, historic, rooted in nature. There was a murmur of agreement. Someone even clapped once. She looked at me then, and I knew. We've been dreaming of creating a space where the kids could grow up with the same traditions we were raised on, a family legacy lodge, and we thought, what better place than Rachel's cabin? A pause, just long enough for the idea to bloom like poison. She's always been generous, Vera added, her tone syrupy now, and we know she'd love to see that place become part of the Donovan legacy. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Then my mother's voice cut in from the first row. It's not like you need it, sweetie. You don't have a family. It wasn't said with spite. It was said like arithmetic, something factual. I felt the silence first, tight, suspended. Expectant. All those faces turned to me like I was the final piece in a ceremony they'd already decided on. No, I said. It wasn't loud, but it was final. Vera's eyes blinked. My father's brow furrowed. My mother tilted her head. It's not yours, I said to Vera, and it never will be. That should have been the end. But I heard the footsteps before I saw him. Dad walking up from the back, slow and deliberate, like he'd been waiting for this moment. He stopped in front of me. You've always been ungrateful, he muttered too close. Then his hand came down across my face, a clean, practiced motion. The crack echoed louder than any applause. Or so I thought, until the clapping began. Vera. One clap, then another. Then others joined, unsure but eager to follow. It spread like rot. My mother didn't flinch. That's why you'll die alone, she said. You're just a barren waste. I didn't respond. I didn't cry. I just turned back toward my empty table. And I remembered to breathe. I don't remember the goodbyes. I don't remember who gave the final toast, or if dessert was even served. I just know that no one stopped me when I walked away. Not Vera, not my parents, not even the woman at the welcome table who had fumbled my name hours earlier. I carried nothing with me except the sting in my cheek and the cold clarity settling in my chest like dry ice. The sun had dropped behind the ridge by the time I reached my car. I sat behind the wheel for a moment, both hands gripping the leather like it might steady me. Finn shifted in the back seat, but didn't whine. He knew this silence. He'd seen it before. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove. No music, no window cracked, just the sound of tires against highway and the hum of breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Trees blurred past the glass in long, muted streaks. Somewhere along the way, I whispered, remember this. Not as a vow, just as instruction. When I got home, I left the wrapped gift in the trunk. The photo collage, the pillow my mother once made. I didn't even look at it. Inside the cabin was dark and still. The kind of still that doesn't ask questions. I hung up my coat, fed Finn, and walked into the kitchen with deliberate hands. I removed my earrings one by one, placing them in the ceramic dish by the sink, then turned on the faucet and let the cold water run. It soothed the swelling, but not the bruise beneath it. That one was deeper, older. I stared at my reflection. The cheek was red, sure, but it was the expression that startled me. Not shock, not devastation, just stillness, like something inside me had stopped moving and wasn't in any hurry to start again. My phone buzzed on the counter. One name lit the screen. Ariadne Wolf. Not a friend, not family, my attorney. I answered on the second ring. Rachel. Her voice was soft but alert. Are you okay? I need to talk, I said. About legal protections. My property. My name. She didn't hesitate. Tell me everything. We spoke for 30 minutes, maybe more. I don't remember her exact words, only the sensation of lines being drawn, steps being laid like stones across a wide, cold river. By the time I hung up, I had a plan. Not for revenge, not even for justice, just for truth. They had written their story tonight, neat, rehearsed, brutal. And I was done playing the role they gave me. It was time to change the ending. I didn't sleep that night, not from adrenaline, not from fear, but from focus. The kind that arrives only after something has cracked open and refuses to be patched. At sunrise, I powered up my laptop and opened a folder I hadn't touched in over a year. Family Finance, Do Not Delete. Inside were dozens of PDFs, bank statements, scanned checks, Venmo receipts. Proof that I had covered medical bills, utility shortfalls, a car down payment Vera once called just a bridge until my next sponsorship cleared. Every file was labeled. Every favor had a date. Then I opened the cabin transfer agreement. Vera had emailed it 2 years ago. A casual draft, she'd said. For estate clarity. My name typed in plain font. Her name in bold as the new owner. I never signed it, but seeing it again now made my stomach knot. I called Ariadne. There's more, I told her. Old documents. A draft deed transfer, and a medical account opened in my mother's name after she was already diagnosed with cognitive decline. She went quiet. Then we need to establish a paper trail, and you need to back up everything digitally and physically. I did. A fireproof lockbox, a cloud drive, a spreadsheet labeled Kalin Family Evidence. I wasn't plotting a battle. I was documenting a crime. That afternoon, I checked the security camera logs from the cabin. I'd installed them last winter after a break-in scare. The recordings were still intact. One clip caught my breath mid-coffee, Vera and Lucian, her husband, pulling into the driveway unannounced, stepping onto my porch with a third man, a mobile notary. Vera used the spare key. I watched them walk into my kitchen, place papers on the counter, gesture toward the dining table. The notary opened his case. Lucian signed. Then Vera. They left 10 minutes later. No message, no call, just entitlement. I downloaded the footage, labeled it unauthorized entry and notary fraud, and emailed it to Ariadne. 10 minutes later, she replied, "They've crossed the line. This is trespassing and attempted document forgery. I'm forwarding this to the State Bar and Secretary of State's office, and I know a reporter who specializes in inheritance abuse cases. Quiet, thorough, discreet." That night, as I was logging the footage into my spreadsheet, I received a text from an unknown number. No name. Just a sentence. "You should be ashamed. You're ruining your family." I stared at the message. Then I opened the clip of the slap. 30 seconds long, my face mid-turn, Vera's clapping. The guests watching unmoved. I posted it. No caption, no hashtags, just truth. The silence lasted 6 hours. Then the fire started. Comments poured in, some stunned, some furious, some too familiar. My sister did this to me. They called me ungrateful too. I was erased after I said no. By morning, the video had 500,000 views, and Vera's name was trending, not because of who she pretended to be, but because of who she really was when she thought no one would ever see. By noon, Vera's blog had gone private. Her influencer page was scrubbed of all family legacy content. One of her sponsors issued a quiet statement. "We have paused collaboration with Mrs. Blackwood pending legal clarification." The fallout wasn't loud, but it was steady and irreversible. I didn't post a word. I didn't need to. The video of the slap, just 30 seconds long, had crossed 700,000 views by morning. Comments stacked like bricks. She clapped, "This is abuse, not tradition. Reminds me of my own mother." Other users dug deeper. They found old posts where Vera bragged about the cabin captioned as "Our Future Family Lodge." Screenshots of my wire transfers started circulating. Someone even found the draft deed transfer unsigned, but undeniable. Meanwhile, my inbox filled with everything from support to vitriol. "You're making something out of nothing. Why now you always needed attention." I didn't answer any of them until Wendell messaged, "You're destroying this family." I replied with a single image, the forged notary document beside my actual signature. No words, just fact. Then my phone rang. "Rachel." My father's voice was low-clipped. "What are you doing? You hit me." I said in front of 60 people. And no one stopped you. A pause. You made your choice that night. Now I'm making mine. He hung up. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. Just stillness. A clean, necessary quiet. That afternoon, Ariadne called. The IRS froze Vera's filings. The state AG is opening a financial misconduct inquiry. APS has confirmed prior reports about your mother's accounts. And one more thing, Lucian's notary license is under review. I exhaled slow and deep. That evening, Vera went live. Sitting in a perfectly curated living room, she looked fragile in a way I no longer believed. She's always been distant, Vera said. We tried to include her, but some people don't know how to accept love. The comments didn't buy it. They posted screenshots, receipts, medical bills, the slap, the slow, deliberate applause. I didn't watch the whole stream, just the first few seconds enough to know she was playing for sympathy, not truth. Let her. Because the truth wasn't mine to push anymore. It had a voice of its own now, and it was louder than any apology she'd never make. 3 weeks passed. Not a call, not an apology, just silence, the kind that didn't ache anymore, the kind that felt earned. The cabin was quiet, even in the wind. Finn had stopped pacing near the door. I had stopped checking my phone. The last message I received was from the county clerk, confirmation of my sole legal ownership, notarized, filed, indexed, no more threats, no more gray areas. Ariadne sent a one-line text, "It's done." Vera's tax filings had been flagged. Wendell was under investigation for misuse of our mother's accounts. The fine alone could have paid off the entire cabin. My mother was transferred to a state-run care facility. I was listed as next of kin. They asked if I'd like to visit. I didn't say no. I just mailed a package. Inside was the embroidered pillow she made when I was 16. The one I brought to the party. I included a note. This was always yours. And mine. I just stopped believing that mattered. I didn't expect anyone to reply. I didn't need them to. That weekend, 3 women arrived at the cabin widows' daughters, mothers all rebuilding from their own quiet erasures. We hiked, we cried, we baked bread, we didn't swap war stories. We didn't need to. The silence between us carried more than words ever could. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't proving anything. I wasn't waiting to be seen. And I wasn't angry, not even with Vera. Because what they broke wasn't me, it was the story they told about me. And now I'd stopped protecting it. Late one evening, I sat alone on the porch. Finn curled at my feet, stars pushing through a soft Carolina sky. I opened my journal and wrote one line. Sometimes survival isn't loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to disappear. And for the first time in years, I believed it. Completely, quietly, and without permission.